All right, so I almost forgot to start the recording for those of you who just are now joining us via the recording. I was saying that tonight is the last official night of class before finals week because since classes started on a Thursday, it's kind of weird, but our finals exams start on Thursday, December the 4th. Our final exam period is Thursday, December the 11th. Okay. Officially, it's supposed to start at 6:15, but I'm going to go ahead and start it at 6 just so we can get it, keep us in kind of this rhythm. I did ask Mandy Davis if she could come so that you all could do kind of an overview of what your executive summary is for her. And we need to talk about, what that might look like tonight. I also want to see if you all, how are you doing on I want both groups to report on how you're doing on the systems analysis, and then to see if there's any questions at all in terms of your individual papers and, what kind of um, concepts you're planning on using to analyze the group dynamics. So we're basically, there's no material I'm covering other than the final project pieces here tonight. So I'm hoping that that will be helpful for you all as we move forward. So I did give feedback to all the groups, to the two groups on the um, resource guide, and they, in terms of the sources, I think the sources that all your colleagues were finding were good. They seem like they are related to what you're talking about and will help you actually in creating that systems guide. Um, and also, they seem to be pretty well written. In one of the cases, the group that did the longer ones, you need to make them a little bit shorter, right? The other group had it more in that kind of 3 sentence kind of amount. So I think for both of you guys, let me let my dog out here. I'm downstairs in a different location than I normally am. So hang on. He'll walk right back in, so this will take about a minute. Um, so I think that you're on the right track. One of the things that I was thinking about allowing you to do, and I think I suggested it to both groups, um, is to use AI to try to get it all in the same kind of voice. Um, so that it sounds like it's written by one, the group kind of sounds similar. I know I struggle with this whenever I'm co-writing, an author or co-authoring a academic paper is sometimes, I'll write this part and then another person writes this part, another person writes this part, and sometimes it's difficult for it to sound like it's all in one voice. And I think that's an appropriate use of AI as long as you've written the initial part, right? But what you will need to do is each person will need to go in and read what AI has changed it to for their source to make sure it's accurate, right? That it's not misrepresenting the source in some way. Um, the other thing that I suggested is that if you have 3 sentences, so the first sentence would be kind of the summary of what you got out of the source. The second sentence um, is the application to Providence Park. And if you have a third sentence, you might need 2 sentences for kind of what you got out of the source, and then have your third sentence be the application to Providence Park. But I want you to remember that you're writing this for the leadership. So imagine that you're writing this for Mandy, okay? I know you've not met Aaron, but you're writing this for somebody who is in the leadership team or for the leadership team at Providence Park. And my dog now wants back in. Oh, this is it. Tony, you got your hand raised.
Oh, I was just going to say that for the AI, when you want it to do like a revision or something, just ask it to read you back your original. and then give you whatever it revised. So if you wanted to alter the tone or the shape, so that in the chat you'll be able to see. And what I like to do is listen to it so that I can read what I originally wrote. And then after it gives me the revised summary of whatever it altered so that I can kind of see it in real time and have both of them one on top of the other.
Oh,
So I
that's a good
can,
idea.
yeah, so I can compare. I found that to be very helpful when doing revisions, not to let it run away with changing too much that I don't want it to change.
Mm-hmm. So that might be something that you all would do, and it'll be up to your groups as to whether one person runs it all the way through the AI and ask it to do that, like one person who's for your group, or if you ask each individual person to do theirs. But the problem with asking each individual person to do theirs, you might do that for the shortening for your group, Tony and Kat, that each individual person does the shortening. But the problem with asking you need one person to get it to read as one voice. So it's going to have to be one of your group members that's probably going to do that final kind of edit um, for the sources in the resource guide. So. So let me just see, first of all, if there are any questions on that portion of the project. Okay, I'm not seeing any there. All right, so let's check in then on how the systems process guide is coming to see if you all how you're coming with that. If you're getting stuck in any places. Um, So I'm just going to check in with both groups. So we'll start with Jeff, you and Doc Rice. Kind of tell us what you've gotten done and what you're thinking at this point in terms of your proposal.
Um, so I know so far what we've done for the systems process guide, we kind of went through each of the I guess the different paragraphs and we just kind of like nailed out each one of those at a time with like different bullet points. So that's kind of where we've gone so far with it.
Do you have any questions about any of the parts at this point or anything that you're going to be including?
Well, I guess for me, when we're researching information and trying to find partners and know that partners are already been established, I guess trying to find the balance because it just is it to make sure we're not rehashing or representing what's already there. And so that's one of the things as I'm looking at the system process guide, we have the partners, we have what their role could be, but it just feels like sometimes that neighbor to neighbor piece is bleeding over into the property management side. So I guess just for me, I'm trying to make sure that, when we working to coalesce those resources that they are specific and it's just been difficult to find something new, something novel and so I'm just going to continue to search and continue to work with the other group members to make sure that what we have is as up to date as possible and as applicable as possible. And so those are just some of my challenges right now.
Hmm. Remember that um, they are a replicator village, right, of the Community First village. And so it doesn't have to be extremely different than what Community First is doing. It's, I mean, there might be some novel pieces, right? I mean, we mentioned peer coaching as an example of being a novel piece that could be built in. Um, but you all may look at and remember the kind of things that were talked about in that Community First interview, the people that when we interviewed them and say, okay, they're farther down the road than these Providence Park people is. We actually need to start them Providence Park at a different place. So this is where you start. I mean, you could even build out phase one, phase two, phase three kind of thing in your proposal if you wanted to. Um, that's what they're doing actually in as they're building out the homes as well as they are, starting with 5 homes or 10 homes, and then they'll build the next piece. Um, So you can, in terms of implementing the ideas, that might be where your novel part comes in. And it might be less about um, completely brand new ideas. You're also going to have different partners, right, than Community First has, because there's not the same people around. So you can propose partnerships that are not already in existence if you know of a partnership that might be useful. I mean, that may be what you're talking about, Doc Rice, that you're looking for, right? And that would be helpful for them to know. So, Jeff and Doc Rice, any issues with people in your group at this point? Everybody participating?
Yeah, everything's good to go. We got everyone ended up getting the appendix good to go. I believe you saw that
Yeah,
before.
you,
So
yeah.
everything's on the same page now. We're in co contact. When I do have a question, so the systems and process guide. Kind of like what Kat and Tony were talking about before with those different buckets, right? With the in the conflict landscape of like different areas of conflict between neighbor to neighbor. Do you want the whole process guide to focus on just one, or because did you want it to have like the multiple ones together and think if that makes sense?
So when you say just one kind of conflict, is that what you're talking about? Or
Yeah, so because with the conflict landscape, would you want just one and us to focus on one area of neighbor to neighbor conflict, or did you want like the multiple ones in there with like the partner
I
roles and
don't
like
think
matching?
you have, I don't think you have to cover all of them.
Okay.
When I originally asked AI to help figure out what might be possible conflict areas for Providence Park, it listed out a whole bunch, right? I mean, that's what I gave you all. And I was using that initially my goal for that was to be able to distinguish between the two conflict, to see if the two teams could be distinct enough. That was what my goal was. And I still think there's potential for overlap, and Doc Rice was mentioning that, in terms of the two teams. I would pick out what you think, and this will be a judgment call on your side, right? And you can talk about this briefly in your executive summary if you would like, is I would pick out maybe the top three areas that you think there might be. You can pick out more than that if you want, but I wouldn't do all of them. If there's 10 areas, I would not do all of them, but I would do more than one. But maybe think about where are the top three sources of conflict or conflict types that they might be dealing with almost immediately. Okay. So, or in the first year of operation. Um, Once they get, I mean, you can imagine that once they are in, kind of operating in their, first year, second year, there are going to be other conflict types that come up. But if your process is working, then they can add that on. So you might kind of visualize down the road, can my process, the process that you're coming up with, can it actually work for additional conflicts? Or what would have to happen in the future if there were additional conflicts that were used? Now, Jeff, what you and Doc Rice do on this may be different than what Tony and Kat do on this. So, I'm really allowing a lot of flexibility within reason in terms of what you're focusing on in terms of the conflicts, but you do not need to focus on all. I think most of those, both groups had about 10, 8 to 10 possible ones, but think about the ones that you think, okay, and you could start with a low-hanging fruit, something that is easier to deal with first, and then see if the process would work for that. If you add on another one, that might be common, okay? And then add on another one, and then see, what would have to be tweaked in the process, the processes that you're proposing to be able to deal with that additional conflict. And you can also acknowledge the limitations of your processes, that these are built for these kinds of conflicts. We realize that additional conflicts might have to build out, a system might have to be built out that is more, in the future. So you can acknowledge that if you want to, somewhere in the systems process guide or in the executive summary. But um, a lot of times at the end of a research article, people will put a limitation section. and a future research section, you almost could build in, this is the starting point. This is and then here are the next stages or phases that we would recommend, but we did not build those out. So you could acknowledge that they need to be built out, but you didn't.
Okay, that's perfect because we ended up so for the conflict landscape side of it, we did have three overarching umbrellas, and then we kind of explained a little bit underneath that of like all the things that involved with that, and then we just got everything related to those three umbrellas later down the line. So we try to focus on partnerships and partner roles that related to those that can directly help and contribute to those types of issues in those umbrellas. And then same things for uh, the reporting referral process. We did one for each of those three overarching of what each process could look like because it could be a little bit different. And then again, trying to do the feedback loops and rhythms to be how can they fit all like what we're suggesting, how can they fit in with all three together? If
Hmm.
that makes sense. That's kind of
Yeah,
how things got brought. We try to tie everything to the beginning of the
yeah.
first
So
question.
one of the things for you to think about there is, I mean, you could have your systems process guide actually divided up by, here's the conflict landscape number one, here's the second one, here's the third one, and have a different process built there. But I would like for you to take a step back. This is hypothetical here, okay? I'm not working in your group, but I would like for you to take a step back and say, all right, can a larger overarching process be built that these could fit within? So, and it may be, if you're building out a flow chart, it may be we have an intake form and it fits into this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, and then you do something different for each bucket. Okay. So it may be that you can't, but that is as much as you can do is common intake form, and it depends on the bucket. And then each line has a little bit different kind of set, and that's fine. But I would like for them to see that it's not just that there is something that is at the top level, if that makes sense. So that it doesn't look like this is three different processes. There may be some similarities, right? And so, but at least at the top level, there needs to be an intake form, and then, but it's possible that the intake form might be, if it is it this or this, and those two things have similar processes. So they actually all go down one line, but this third thing is so different that it's got to have a very different kind of process.
That makes sense.
All right, well, I'm gonna turn over to Tony and Kat. How are you all doing on your systems process guide, and do you have questions?
Um, I think we're doing pretty good. So we uh, try to construct a process that goes along that line of simplicity. And within our drive, we actually I built templates that are plug and play. So the group members could go in and I don't know how appropriate it is here for me to share, but the group members can go in and this will be what we submit to you on Sunday for our template or outline, where you're inserting your conflict type, where it occurs, why it happened, and you just go down the line. And then your internal partners, which I identified to be as property management and neighbor support, in case that occurred, or missionals and the neighbor counselor, but that could expand or shorten as you needed it. And then how each partner contributes, and then and then you just kind of lay it and then briefly lay it out, and then continue through if there are other internal partners or external partners. uh, this right here was a template that I think we're going to ultimately put into our executive summary, identifying who's the primary role in responsibility, the secondary, and when they're shared. and it can all be expanded out. Then for the referrals, goes from most conflicts would end up going either property management, like a lease violation or theft or something like that. Then they could go over to neighbor support when it gets to a behavioral side or a substance abuse side, and then they can connect from there and feedback within that system. And we who receives information at each stage, how the conflict is reported. So I pretty much identified it as like an incident report coming in, whether it was from a neighbor or a missional or a staff member or something observed. They can be provided with a form to fill out, and then the after actions taken after review and moving in through from there. I tried to design it with the thought of the flow chart in mind. So it would start with incident report comes in, property management reviews. Property management then determines who needs to be contacted. If it needs to remain within property management, go into one of its internal buckets, which would be an expanding out process as they grew. Initially, it would probably start with just one person or a couple of people handling all of the maintenance issues, the rules and policy violations, anything that like theft that the neighbor did want to report to police. And for mine, there was always a criminal element. If it had a criminal element to it, and police or fire, like if it was arson or any kind of just fire that occurred, well, then the fire marshal would have to be contacted, and they'd have to clear it for insurance purposes, and it'd have to be documented. So it would remain within property management, but it would go to neighbor support if a behavioral issue was evident. And then it would go through, and then feedback loop would be periodically, how does the feedback come in? Is it going to come in, or is it going to come back from neighbor support, or as it kind of proceeds down the line, it would always be able to return back to sender if it got to a partner and the partner said, well, this isn't for us. And then they can send it back. And then I tried to make it with an ease of use so that our members could focus on getting their conflicts in, and the template could either be something that they continue on in the future if they chose to kind of create a data trail for a centralized database, making it simple so that maybe AI could be incorporated in tracking and keeping the data. But I think we've got it. We had a meeting yesterday that was really good.
So so that's interesting. I mean, you've got lots of details there in that template in that form. So if each one of your team members is filling out the form for their type of conflict, how do you see a whole process coming? Kind of the question I think that Jeff was asking, how do you see the whole process coming together into one systems guide? Are you seeing that each
So
conflict's going to have its own?
I was actually Kat's spreadsheet idea was great, that gave us the overview of all the conflicts. So if each member either wanted to input into there, which was probably going to have the overview of everything, but we would use in the presentation of the systems guide only one or two of those templates to show and say, this is what the process looks like, and this is how we envision it. But then in the appendix, we have all of the conflicts listed within either their templates or within that spreadsheet, so that it's more of a, okay, well, this has occurred. Well, hey, we've got a template that already kind of lays out what we can use. But it's not going to bloat our overall presentation. I put within there, I put like my arson one and then the theft example that we use to kind of build the spreadsheet. And that, it would seem, is easiest, instead of having a whole lot in front of you. Say, if you would like to see more conflicts that we identified as a group, you can refer down to the appendix, and then they can pull through, because each of our bucket areas covered different areas. Mine was safety and security. So, I dealt kind of with the conflicts that would concern with law enforcement mostly, but also could potentially be labeled as a behavioral issue, such as, someone that saw a green dragon on their house. So they obviously think that's a security issue, but in reality, that's a neighbor support issue, and it needs to go to support services. And it would just be how I heard Jared explain it in his Zoom, it was just more everything came in through property management, and then property management sent it along to whom needed to receive it. And it would be support services for anything that was mental or behavioral related, or restorative justice via neighbor support if it was a interpersonal conflict between neighbors that needed to be resolved but was completely separate from any criminal process.
So do you think that for, I'm going back to Jeff's question, that for the most common, so maybe that you could pick out 2 or 3 of the most common examples and create a flow chart? That's an overall flow
Yeah.
chart
Yeah,
for,
yes, yes,
okay.
because
Thank you, Jen.
they flow the same. I was going to use my example, like, so you gave us the bucket of systems administration, which some of the conflicts that AI spit out to you that you shared with us was like gaps in communication, inconsistent incident reports, or like lack of information being shared. So all those basically flow into one big bucket with which is issues with information flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I have each of the conflicts detailed out, asking the 4 questions on the spreadsheet. But the one I'm probably going to put 1 or 2 on there because they differentiate in the systems process guide when we turn it into you as a draft. But overall, when we stick it into the systems process guide, I'm just going to label it information flow as the
Okay.
conflict area. Because if I go back and I say information flow, because when I was doing this, it's almost the same. So if I go to the question, like, how is conflict reported and documented? Well, anyone can communicate when the problem is noticed. So that's the one thing. But so most of the time I came up with the same thing. Concern is reported to property management, care team, missional staff. Concern is documented by neighbor or the person who reported it on the incident form. Form is received by either a middleman that, sends it to property management, or care team or property management, who have like a posted time frame. We will hand this off within 48 hours. And I put recommend no more than 48. And the next step is concern is property management. It's routed to the different bucket areas. Maintenance are a couple of different bucket areas that we'll come up with.
Security,
Yeah,
rules and policies.
security,
I got you.
yeah, stuff like that. And then if not, then it's sent to care team for service request. 4 was a response is given to the resident to clarify the message or discuss resolution. The next one is if resolution is not possible or conflict requires external partners, then it is escalated to the proper staff or Providence Park leadership in order to go to an external partner. And then the next, I think that's one of the questions was actions taken. So I had a complete form, review and categorize, property management team discusses form and involves via neighbor services. I just put care team on there if needed, response, resolution, escalation, follow up, closeout.
Okay.
So, and most of that stuff follows within that process. So if it goes to a bucket in property management, let's say air conditioner's broken, then maintenance can fix the air conditioner and then follows back up to property management, said air conditioner fix. They enter everything in the central database, and then they close it out. But everything is record kept in there. So something like information flow, or even how everything, it's going to go honestly in one general way. So most of the conflicts in property management are going to end up in that. What have you noticed? What is the complaint? File the report, or whoever you tell, file the report. Let's review it within a certain time. Send it out to the correct buckets. Come up with resolution to the problem. I know one of them could be like needs to go to residence council or something like that. And then talk to the person who filed the incident report, and then escalate or resolution, close out. And then one of our things could be follow up in 30 days with, so it's kind of, a loop, because you're following back up when it gets back here to make sure nothing happens. But it's just going to be a standard. You notice the problem, and then it branches out.
So it sounds like that you all are proposing, and this is good for the neighbor to neighbor group to know as well, that you are proposing that like it at Providence Park, I mean at First Community, that everything initially comes in through property management for them to decide if it needs to go to neighbor care or not.
Well, yeah, if it doesn't fall under property management scope. Now, honestly, Tony and I think there should be a middle committee. But in reality, let's be smart with funding, lack of funding coming up, possibly lack of manpower. That may not be a reality for a startup. So you have
Well,
to
and in
think
the
what,
beginning, the middle might not actually be necessary, but
right,
as it grows, it will need a more dedicated group to
right,
be to step in to say, okay, so we this needs to go over to enable support, or this needs to reach out to an external contact or external contractor right away. This isn't something that actually needs to fall and stay within the property management staff,
Okay.
right.
So
and then they delegate out.
So one of the questions that you all may not have an answer to, but I want you to be thinking about this for when Mandy comes in on the 11th of December, is is there one intake form
Yes,
for both groups?
yes. Because that's what she talked about, what she wanted on a computer. In the
Okay.
last interview, that's what she talked about, what she wanted.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can't get a computer program up and running with your first 5 residents, but one incident report in a generic way is something that we recommend.
Okay. So one of the
Yeah.
things that might be helpful is if the two teams could share what their thoughts are on that incident report and what it would look like so that we end up having the same incident report.
Tony's actually got one. He's working
Well,
on.
I've started thinking about one. I put a
You
place in
shared
there
one though.
for it.
You
Yeah,
shared
So,
a template.
I
so,
did.
so Jeff, what I want Jeff and Doc Rice to hear is that they don't necessarily need to create a incident report.
No.
That the property management group is going to create that, and that's going to end up being something that's used in common between the two groups. Does that work for all of you?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that that is best because with with everything that property management has, and I understand that Providence Park will have a certain sovereignty and a relationship with the sheriff's department and all of that. There are certain things that occur that must be reported, such as certain fire incidents that occur, or if they want to get the insurance to pay for something that has occurred, there has to be a police report or a report from the fire department as to what the cause was and what happened. So the criminal aspect allowed it to be within property management and allowed everything to come in to say, okay, we're looking for certain qualities. And if these qualities aren't met within property management, then it goes to neighbor support, or a weekly meeting will occur at the end of every week for the things that are just big and sprawling we don't know, where probably the two property management and neighbor support staff will have to come together to determine what is actually going on. But a simple
Right.
intake form, which I called an incident report, but it could be an intake form or anything like that, would be
Yeah.
the logical starting place.
Okay.
Right.
Jeff and Doc Rice, does that work for your group?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Mhm.
Okay. So be aware of that. So Tony and Kat, whenever you all get that, you may not have it completely formed, but send me a link to that and I'll add that into our project material doc materials and send it out to everybody so that everybody knows what that looks like. It might not be the final version of it, but when you get that ready to go, then share that with me so I can share it with everybody else, okay?
And I was going to say for the meeting, for the rhythm feedback loops, like one of the ones I had, and I think this is going to be good for basically all of them. Like we said, number 1, weekly inter-team property management meetings, weekly coordination meetings between property management and neighbor servicers for the care team, whatever they're calling that, bi-weekly meetings or informal huddles with missionals and volunteers. And then 4, the monthly resident council meeting. And then 5, either I proposed, and we'll explain this in the systems and process guide, quarterly or twice a quarter, leadership and the executive director get together, take a look at the trends and incident reports, and reviews the practices, procedures, and SOPs,
Okay.
and adjust.
So this is an example of where if we had time, and we don't, okay, I
Mhm.
don't think it would
No,
be
we definitely-
cool. We don't, but it would be cool if we would have had time to have here's the overall process, right?
Mhm.
Here's the two groups that have the two kind of groups, the big buckets, right? Neighbor and property management. And then here's the rhythm, the feedback loop that everybody could use, right? So at this point, I would be fine with you all using the same feedback stuff like you just said, Kat, if it works for the other group too. So I would recommend that there be cross communication between the groups on things that you think your group has come up with. This would be true, Jeff and Doc Rice as well. If there are things that your group comes up with that you think this would work across the board, so that it almost becomes we have an intake or incident report that's across the board. We have the feedback loop that's across the board. We can have an overall, we can have that in both of the reports that are going to be put in. And just to let her know when we present it that that's kind of how we visualize it. So it might be in her presentation. So, yeah, so Tony just wrote, Jeff and Doc Rice, you can set up a Zoom meeting between you four if you want to hammer out the details if it would be helpful.
Or
Even
we
if,
could just give them access to the folder.
yeah,
That works too. I mean, because
Yeah.
how I'm seeing it, because neighbor support, how I would see it, just coming from my own background on things, their biggest things are HIPAA concerns. So property management won't be within medical confidentiality, in my view. That will anything that comes into privacy, the medical issues of the individual needs to go and be filtered through neighbor support because they'll be the ones who are more closely working with the behavioral
health and
and
behavior.
substance unit.
Yeah.
And that's so my mind is kind of seeing it as placing it in four kind of, is this HIPAA related? Does this have a potential criminal aspect, or is it going to require extensive documentation for insurance purposes? Is it going to remain within property management, or is it something for neighbor support? Like, is it a lease violation? And then that would be a partnership between property management and neighbor support to get the individual the financial assistance that they need, as far as money management. And maybe if Tara had given me an example of an individual who had a gambling addiction, so he had made enough money to pay all of his bills, but as soon as his money came in, he went and gambled, and she had to really work with him on setting up a process so that, or at least how it was coming together, that they were going to set up a process so the payments could come out, and then what was remaining, because they're not, they offer him substance abuse, or I think it's gambling anonymous or something like that, assistance in helping with his addiction, but their primary concern was helping him getting his bills paid. So then every group is being satisfied. The landlord's happy, the lease is not in violation, they're getting the opportunity to get the help that they could need to repair the issue or correct it if they so choose, and their privacy is being maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And then that could probably start, because the intake form will have to be examined and probably have a little box at the bottom that the individual who examines it checks and says, this sounds like a HIPAA behavioral issue,
Mm-hmm.
and it might need to go to neighbor support. This is a lease violation maintenance issue. It needs to remain within property management and follow its process. This is a potential criminal issue. We need to be in communication with our law enforcement or fire department partners. And then for neighbor support, this doesn't meet any of those criteria. The individual is, maybe their medication isn't working. Maybe they've missed a dose or something of that nature. Neighbor support needs to step in with the children's hospital partner and the medical partners in order to ensure that the individual is on track. That's where
So
my mind goes.
yeah, no, and that's the reason why I'm really glad that you're working on the draft intake form, and that Jeff and Doc Rice, your group doesn't have to worry about that at this point, because I think Tony's got a picture here of how this is going to work. So what I would suggest when you all are turning in your draft systems process guide for me to look at this weekend is just to identify any place that you think there are common processes between the two groups. And you could just say, this could be a common process, or you could like put it in yellow or highlight it or something for me, just so that I know this might be a common process that the two groups might need to work on together, hypothetically, or that could be something that both groups could use. Yeah, Cap?
So what we were going to do for turn-in, and we can highlight that when we're doing it, is that template Tony showed you. We were just going to pick the most common conflicts and put it together on one sheet and turn that in. But what we can do is when we go through those conflicts we submit to you for the process guide on that template Tony showed, we can highlight in yellow, like you said, the common areas.
Yeah. Because it would be helpful if we know what those are, at least to identify, between the two groups, what things might potentially could use the same processes. So that's what I was thinking about. All right. You all are I can just tell you are in the weeds. I mean, which is good. You're in the trenches here working on this. You've thought through things. Your groups are doing it differently from each other, and that is absolutely fine. I don't care about that. But at this point, before we go on to see if there's questions about the other remaining parts of the whole project, what do you have questions about what's due, the draft that's due for this weekend? Seeing shaking heads from Jeff. Tony, no? Okay. All right. So I know that you have to add on top of it an executive summary. We went through a little bit about what the executive summary would look like last time. I think I gave you a reading for that, or showed you an example of the different parts. When I get that submitted, when you all eventually submit that to me, so all of that's due, the final project, executive summary, all of that is due on December 5th. It is very possible that I will write a cover executive summary between the two groups, okay? Where I'm going to actually be identifying, as I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm going to be identifying here's where I see the overarching processes that could work together. So be aware that I will probably put a cover of some kind after I see your final version. So you don't have to write that part, but before we give it to Mandy and Aaron, I will add something as well. Okay. But are there any questions about your team's executive summary?
Uh, we're on the executive summary. I don't know, Kat's on that one. I was thinking about the flow chart. I'll wait until that comes up.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a second. Executive summary? Any questions, Jeff, Doc Rice? You haven't gotten to that place yet. I mean, it's like writing an abstract. You do that at the very end of your paper. Okay. All right. Kat, any questions on executive summary at this? Okay. Flow chart then, Tony.
So for the flow chart, because obviously it dumps out it, and how I'm looking at the process, it's going to dump out in a lot of different ways. I don't think you can create one flow chart that would absolutely cover every single one unless I could figure out a way to make it adaptable where, I mean, maybe with AI I can, where I insert the conflicts and then I'd like it to follow this, PM to, incident report comes in, it goes to property management, or it goes to neighbor support, and it just kind of shows out the process. But it will always change if, because different partners are going to be reached. It's a form that like the flow chart will basically have to be a template, and we can give you a couple examples, pull a couple of our common conflicts and say, this is how it'll look going through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if that's kind of, because I mean, I think we're going to try to, I think it's actually Kishana who offered to work on and get the flow chart together and see ultimately. But I didn't know if you maybe wanted to see a couple of examples.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's kind of what I was trying to get at with Jeff when he was asking the question, and I was thinking about buckets of conflicts, right? So the whole flow chart might start initially with this common intake or incident form, okay? Then it may be that it's okay, is this neighbor support or is this property management, okay? And then you may not, in your case, for the property management side, just leave the neighbor support side alone, right? It's kind of like a genetic tree, family tree.
yeah.
Don't fill out the part that's not yours. Fill out the part that's just yours, and then build out the part. And I would pick out your what you think might be the top three, 2 to 3 property management conflicts, and kind of work it through. And it may be, like I was saying to Jeff, that there might end up being a couple of them. The maintenance and information stuff might be similar, right? They might actually have a
Mhm.
very similar kind of process, but theft, probably a
Yeah.
different process, right? And so you might end up having 3 buckets represented by 2 kind of flow chart going down,
Yeah,
right?
almost looked like a CEO chart, branching down, starting with incident report, then heading to either proper. I mean, normally, I guess property management might be a little bit on top unless they have somebody who examines the report and then sends it down the bucket tree. But
Yeah.
then as it goes out and sprawls out, it will identify and land where it needs to and connect
Yes.
with its partners.
So
But
I
yeah,
would like to see a
yeah,
couple of them worked out, I guess is what I'm saying.
okay, okay, I can
Yeah.
do that. Yeah,
On the
we can
same,
do that.
again, think of it as as an org chart, that kind of chart, or I'm
Mm.
thinking about a family tree where you've got,
Yes.
you've got your mom's side of the family only, or in your case, the property management side of the family is what you're working on, but you're only, maybe there's 5 brothers and you only do 2 of the brothers, all the way down. So, I mean, I'm thinking
Would
about
you
that.
like to also, I know you asked for Sunday submission to be this template that we're going to send you. Would you like for us to put a couple of examples on there so you can see how it looks once
I
it's filled
think
out and
if you
completed?
get that far, remember this is a draft.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
just making sure people are working, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
getting
we're all
feedback,
working on it.
okay?
Yeah.
So if you get that far where you've got 1 or 2 of them worked out, then yeah, include that.
All
Yeah,
right, will do.
yeah, it might be a little too much for a draft. But Tony, you've been working on stuff, so you might have one already. But what I was going to ask too, so along with what Tony's saying, so that general process guide, that process that I was talking about, which was generic, that could be one of the ones that we do, and then we could just have 1 or 2 specific examples, correct? Like,
Yes.
and it's based off the bucket. So we could say Tony is one example, and then, I mean, I'm not going to do maintenance because maintenance is really simple if you have an air conditioner broken
Yeah,
down.
in
Or
comparison, it's very
yeah,
simple.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like another one could be something specific, like um a lease, generic, like a lease violation. Like we could do those 2 generic ones and then have the generic. Well, we could do those 2 fleshed out, and then we could have the generic one on top, and that could be our total of 3, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think that'll give them the foundation for what they need. And then the generic one, which is just a generic process, can help them with that. Okay, we won't have it by Sunday, but that gives us something to
Yeah, and that's
chew
fine.
on.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Let's move to the individual parts of the project. And I want to just kind of ask each of you individually. You probably hadn't even thought about this. I know if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have, but let's just brainstorm. You are supposed to think about and analyze your group's work together through some concept, principle, theory lens that we've talked about this semester. I don't know that you've had any conflicts, and so that may make it a little bit more difficult, although you might have had some. But if you think about we've had disagreements or we've not had everybody participating, or we actually have different ideas about which way we should go on this. So it doesn't have to be a knockdown, drag out kind of conflict, but where have you had to take, I mean, and I would, if I was doing this, I would pick one of the textbooks. I would pick either the Urey textbook and the possible model, or I would pick some chapter, maybe trip dynamics, thinking about some of the things that you all have used in the past when you've talked about, power, um, systems. I don't think you're probably working too hard to have a lot of interpersonal conflicts. So I don't know, anyway, I don't know that for sure. But have any of you thought about what you might use as kind of a frame for talking about how your group worked together? And it can be good work together, right? Like how you
Swarming,
actually decided swarming.
swarming,
Yeah.
swarming.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to go with. Because
Actually,
I
that's
think
good, but in some ways, because swarming relates to you all are coming together to help this community.
and we're bringing in different areas, expertise, and different thought patterns. And also, most of us have never done work within this, so it kind of fits more naturally to Yuri's example within the book. None of us have, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I know I haven't worked anywhere like in this kind of related field. So, a different aspect of approaching this problem is what's kind of bringing us together on the swarm as a third side to say, here's how we would recommend, coming from different walks of life, what, because I mean myself, I tend to like to operationalize things. I want to build stuff that actually works. When you're in the working world, they say, show me, don't tell me, show me, make
Mm-hmm,
something that
mm-hmm,
works. But in academia, you got to do the show me part.
mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
got to really focus on that. And but I know Kat and Kanisha and even Nico's working on it, and Latara. All of our members bring different aspects and points of view that help us come together with a single cohesive image for what we'd at least recommend as an approach.
So good. That's a great example. So I'd like to hear from maybe see if the rest of you could pull something else out, even though you might end up using similar as Tony. Okay. What concepts or principles do you think you might be able to pull in to kind of explain how your group is working together?
I think, unless you want to go, Jeff, you had any points? I'll defer the floor to you.
You sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So overall, I think the group's working really well. And I would say everyone's doing really great. One thing I noticed is so I have a tendency to try and make things more complicated in the process than it needs to be. Sometimes I'm thinking bigger picture, like more of like broad scale of editing things. So, Doc Rice has been amazing with bringing me that new perspective, like that balcony view in a sense. It's like, whoa, hold on now. There's other options here, right? Generating some different options. Like there's different options of how we can navigate this process to help kind of, keep us on track and keep us in an efficient way moving along.
And to add to that, I think, and thank you, Jeff, for that. I appreciate it. I think all of us are zooming in and zooming out because we have to also be mindful, even in the group work. Some of us have families, some of us have things that actually come up, and even recently, as last week, things have come up that just took priority, and I think that we're learning as a group to kind of, okay, well, what can we do to kind of fill in the gaps? Because, at the end of the day, we want the project to complete the project, and to people to contribute, but we know that things happen, and at the end of the day, we're colleagues and we're trying to get to that same place together. And so I think that's one of the things that I've been seeing is being compassionate, empathetic, but also having that structure in place to say, okay, here are our goals, here are our deadlines, can you do it? But then also being understanding when things just happen just out of our control. And I think that, and I know for me, because I haven't had a break, I need Thanksgiving. I got to sit down and, just have a couple hours just to really process this and see how it works, so I can make some better contributions. And I think all of us, can benefit from that. So that's what I'm seeing now.
Yeah, so really both a task and a relationship focus for your group members. I'm hearing both of those things, so that's good. Kat, what about you? Any concepts you've thought about using for your analysis?
Well, I mean, if I take a look I'm kind of looking at it two ways, group and personal. So I'm going to use one textbook for the group, and just as Doc Rice and Jeff had said, jury is more relevant, and I can work with that within, talking about the group process, like going to the balcony, being empathetic, or had Tony said, swarming, getting everybody together to jump on it and come up with ideas. But if I take a look at it from a personal side, like reflection of my place in the group, I think I'm going to take a look at like power, because I'm when it comes to me, I've been in charge, and I've been in places where if I see something going to the left or the right, I let everybody talk, but I'm going to grab it, organize it, ask opinions, let everybody have their feedback, and then I'm going to let it set sail smoothly and everything goes. But with that power, I'm going to write about how I need to learn to let go. So I was getting my hair done yesterday for my little elopement ceremony I had today. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And Tony was running the meeting. And that's one of the things with the power I want to work on. I want to learn to let go and shift the power to other people. And he did a fantastic job. But here's where I have to work on myself. I'm sitting there in the chat like, okay, but wait, do this. Don't do this. So my hair is getting dyed, and I'm on Zoom on my phone, and I'm listening, and I'm there interacting, and Latara is reading my messages, but I have to learn to not coordinate the meeting and fully pull myself out of it. So when I write my paper, I'm going to write it from a group perspective of Yuri, but also write it as a reflection of myself in the group process.
I love this, Kat. I love, love, love this so much, because I would love for your analysis to not just be about the group, but also about what have you learned that you can improve personally, so that it becomes a growth like reflection for yourself, that you're thinking about, here's where I came in, here's what I actually did that helped, here's where I struggled. So that it doesn't have to be about just, about your classmates, right? I mean, it could be group dynamics, but also about that. So I would encourage everyone to do the same thing. So these are really, really good ideas, and I thought it would be helpful for people who might get stuck to hear them. Well, as per the way I do things sometimes when I want to brainstorm with ChatGPT, I did ask ChatGPT to actually also identify concepts that you all could use. So I'm going to share my screen. You could do a similar kind of thing. All I said was, what concepts might students use to analyze their final project group dynamics from this semester's reading? Now you have to realize I've got a whole folder project on conflict management, so it knows the whole class. All right. So here's what it gave me. So I'm going to go through these pretty slowly. This is a nice kind of summary of the class. That way, if anybody wants to take screenshots who is watching this eventually, you could do that. So the trip goals, right? So taking a look at that. Those were things we covered early in the semester. I don't know, by the way, I've not checked to see if these are the right chapters from the interpersonal conflict book. Okay, so you have to realize that sometimes ChatGPT hallucinates. We don't know which version it's using. Conflict styles. How did that come in? The whole power issue that Kat was talking about, and Rice, that Rice model. I think actually, Jeff, you you didn't use the word framing, I think, but that's kind of what I was hearing from some of the things you were saying, is like, how are we framing what's actually happening here? And Doc Rice as well. It's been a while since we've looked at systems and different systems theory. Coalition formation sometimes can help. Emotions, when things are in our face, Dr. Rice talked about when things are in our face and what happens there. And then, the whole idea of listening but that balcony view that you all were talking about. This reminds me of what you just said, Kat, how student stories about themselves. I'm always the planner, shaped participation in conflict. Of course, the whole third side thinking and the circle of possibility. Don't know that you're going to have to do forgiveness, repair, and community healing unless people aren't doing their work. And then how have they actually explained why they didn't do their work or show up? That actually might come up in your group. Then you've got whole cultural backgrounds and, of course, peer coaching. I'm guessing that some of your group members might not have backgrounds that they're really strong in doing this kind of work. So some of you might have to kind of coach them along. Or maybe you're having to be coached. Okay. Then the whole issue of trauma-informed principles, as you've been thinking about that, and then group decision making. And then if you used AI at all as a thought partner, that is kind of something that's been an underlying thing we've learned about in this class. So those are some ideas of other things you can bring in. You don't need to bring in all of them, okay? But you can bring in some things. All right, so are there any questions about that individual paper? It is an analysis of your own behavior and growth as well as the group's dynamics.
So just one, yeah, let me. We're also permitted to kind of examine within some of the aspects of the project itself, right? Is it solely a paper focused on just our group dynamics and work, or can we also future, implications, limitations, recommendations
You
that we
can,
may have?
you can, and that might be another place where you could bring in limitations, like maybe our group was hampered by this,
Yeah,
maybe the timeline, or maybe you could even make suggestions to me in that paper about how I could better make the project be a better fit for this class. So I would be fine with you actually talking about those kinds of things too.
just keep it within tailored towards focusing on our group dynamics and how it related to the project or the timeline. So group and how the timeline affected us or what might work better in the future. Because I was wondering on the pivot there if it was going to be, because the executive summary will be short, and any thoughts or ideas that I had that were more targeted at Providence Park and away from the group aspect of it. And that's where I was wondering, just kind of things
Yeah,
that I've
so
come
I
across.
think I would, rather than talking about I would not have it be about Providence Park,
Okay.
but I would have it be about your ability to do the work for Providence Park. That could be a structural issue in the way the assignment was set up. Okay.
Yeah.
That could be the fact that I broke you up into two groups and you really need to all be one group. That hampered you. Okay. I mean,
Okay.
there could be a variety of things that impacted the final project that you're
Gotcha.
critiquing. And I'm fine with that, but I don't want it just to be a critique of the project. I want it to also, for you to also be thinking about what actually happened as your group worked together and your individual portion contribution
Okay.
to that group.
Okay. Because I just wanted to be sure because mine may have potentially gone to a critique of the process that we generated, the weaknesses I know that it
Yeah, I
has,
wouldn't
or
do as much about the process, the critique of what you all generated.
okay.
I would do
Thank
more a
you. That cleared it.
critique, a critique, kind of a meta communication. You're critiquing your
Gotcha.
communication. You're critiquing the way that you approached the project
And then
and
all
the
of the
structural
factors in the
parameters
framework.
around that project.
Absolutely. Thank you. That cleared it up. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, and I think the form is pretty straightforward that you're going to be also filling out on your classmates. So I think that's all the project, basically. Um, the other thing I want to ask you about was, how do you think we should go about doing this presentation with Mandy on the 11th? It wasn't originally part of the grade, right? Because I didn't want ever, and I knew people were not going to all be able to be here. But I would love to hear your thoughts, suggestions. What does that look like? Is it that I just say, okay, group one, you go, you present your executive summary and you just work through the executive summary parts, which that would be adequate. And then group two, you go through the executive summary, and then we each we have questions and answers, because she's going to ask questions, right? What I'd like to be able to do is to get her the material ahead of the meeting, but I don't know that she will have had time to read it since I'm getting it on the 5th and this is the 11th. So I see Tony says, Jeff, you've done stuff like this before, right? Or you, Kat. Jeff, you had your microphone out like you were getting ready to say something. So suggestions with a client like this?
So I haven't like presented an executive summary before, but like I've lived my life the last 17 years giving PowerPoint presentations, um, full of information. But I think the executive summary is the way to go. And we could either go through the executive summary as a document, group by, I like the group by group because I know, like Dr. I said, everyone's got 5,000 things going on. And I think if we get together for a presentation as a whole, we would need to do a little bit more collaboration. And there's just not some time to game this out and do collaboration since a lot of us are already running on a thin string. So I think, Dr. CC, that I think I like the group one, group two, and executive summary. And then, I mean, we could either put our executive summary out there, or we can just do 1 or 2 slides that highlight the key points of our executive summary so that Mandy has a visual when she's looking at it rather than us reading her some words. And then we can present it that way. Kashina told us about Beautiful.ai. It makes PowerPoint presentations. So what we could do is you could just stick your executive summary in there and, flesh it out a little bit like you yourself and Tony do with ChatGPT. And then it could make us a 1 or 2 slide PowerPoint presentation. And we can just present those to Mandy and talk it out and then ask her if she has any questions. She'll have the executive summary in front of her, but at least we can give her a visual and it can be kind of professional.
I'm writing down these different tools. Okay. I am fine with that. Jeff, from the other team, what do you think about that idea? Having a couple slides per team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll be fine. I mean, so for my work, I'm used to presenting and everything. I mean, this past, what was it? Friday, Monday, was it Tuesday? I gave out 1 hour long presentations, just nonstop talking, for a presentation that's only supposed to be like 15, 30 minutes long. Um, but I like that Kat mentioned only about 1 to 2 slides because I mean, we're providing a lot of good information, but we don't want to overload um, her. We just want to keep some of the big highlights of what's going on and why it's worth, looking at it. Um, and I mean, with the executive summary too, sending that as a copy for her to kind of see, look through while we're presenting and stuff like that. But I think it's a good idea. But you said not everyone will be required to show up, right?
Yeah, I can't do that because we have some people that are completely online. So
Hmm.
that's why this is not part of your grade.
Oh,
Originally, I hadn't even built it in. And then I looked at the schedule and I'm like, I don't even have our final exam time on the calendar on the original syllabus. And I'm like, so tonight's the last night? I'm like, that can't be right. And so I'm like, well, what if we could get, yeah, extra points? That'd be nice. What if we could get the people, I mean, if I could get Mandy, if Mandy or Aaron weren't going to be here, I'm just going to have like a celebration of this is the work, really good work, right? Um, but I reached out and found out that Mandy could. We don't know about Aaron for sure. And so I thought, well, let's do something to at least have you present so that she could ask you questions. Um, and so what I was thinking originally was that it wouldn't be more than 5 minute presentation. So Jeff, you cannot do an hour. Okay. So Doc Rice, you keep him on track here. All right. 5 minutes, no more than
That's
10
why I
at
didn't.
most.
Yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
didn't want to do it because if I do it,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
So
want to
this
talk
might be
about
a
details.
this might be a Cat and Doc Rice presentation, not a Jeff and Tony presentation. So maybe that you guys do the slides and then they present it or something. I mean, I don't know what you all do, but and I don't even really care if you have slides. But I do like the idea of having something to look at, and it's going to look bad probably if one of the groups has slides and the other one doesn't. So, I really don't care. I mean, so what if we do that? Aim for 5 minute summary of what you all did. Okay. Have 1 to 2 slides if that works for you. And then we'll open it up to questions for her.
Yeah, I think that works because like I said, I did a lot of work on the actual construction of the template and how I see the process laying out, but I wouldn't want to be the one delivering that because I have a tendency to expand and maybe go too long. So 5 minutes would be hard for me. But being on standby to answer specific questions, I can definitely aid and assist with that and kind of get at specifically answering how is this actually gonna work? So what's the mechanism or things like that if she just had more kind of specific details or if she offered her own thought on a conflict and how it would kind of play out if she were to use the system that we've designed for property management and or on the other side as well. I think that's my best role in that.
And Kat shook her head yes.
Yes, although Tony, I think I'm gonna keep you and Jeff on an egg timer. And if she asks questions, then I'm gonna poke you in the chat and then and get you to draw it to a conclusion.
All
I
right.
love
that
it.
sounds
I
good.
love it.
I like that. Jeff, you can see she's being even on your team, okay?
That gives me some flashbacks. So for work, every time in the beginning of the year we have what we call ARC Acro. So conferences. So all the high school counselors in the region will come out, and then colleges will give a speech. So in the past, you had 5 minutes, and then they're taking too long. They cut it down to 2 minutes. So you're there like with a preemptive speech, and you're like, "There's no way I can do this in 2 minutes." And then you're just sitting there. They're like, "Get off the stage, get off the stage." And then some years they, depending who runs it, they're literally dragging you off the stage and like kicking you off for
That's funny.
going too long.
Well, yes. So we won't. We could silence you and put you in the waiting room. We could do that in Zoom. Yeah, yeah. Let you back in. Well, I'll let you all figure that out. If somebody else from your group really just would love to show up and kind of finish this out, it doesn't have to fall on your 4 shoulders. Because I know at the beginning of this group project, we said you don't have to be the leader, right? But I know you're my liaisons to the group, so.
Well, that's okay. This can be my assignment, and then so while you guys are talking, I've already broken down how to do our final project in increments so I can assign everybody a job. So I already have everybody jobs. So this can be my job, and then I can give a job to somebody else. So this works out perfectly.
All right, Doc Rice, you see that? You can assign out everybody else and you can just say this is your job. Yeah. Give Jeff the hard part. I'm just playing. Okay, is there anything else that we need to talk about tonight before we move to a close? I heard Kat say I think she said, it kind of just in conversation that she eloped today.
Yes. I told everybody on Wednesday in our group meeting, and I got my hair and makeup done at one of the teaching academies for hair, and they did a really good job. What usually cost me $300-400 only cost me $68. Um, so I was quite surprised. And they did my hair and makeup, and we just decided to make it official because we're older. My whole thing is people say a wedding's a celebration, but I see it as a transaction. People give you gifts, you pay to feed them. Um, and so I don't need anybody's stuff, and I don't want to have a big wedding because I'm not paying for people to come eat food. If that's the case, I'm going to go feed those that don't have food. I don't need anything. I have too much already. If people give me presents, it's going to stress me out. So we went to the old mill and it was only $25 for 30 minutes. And we had a pastor from another church who's licensed to officiate do that. And we had 5 or 6 people come, and one had to leave. And we just treated everybody to a lunch. Littlefields was closed, so we went to a little cafe and called it a day. And so now I'm official, and I do love him, but I can have his health insurance now. So it's not going to cost me Cobra. Because Jeff, you can tell people this when you're talking to high school students. The name of the game as a grown-up is not salary, it's health insurance. Have as many forms of health insurance as you can. But anyways, yeah, let me go. I'm jumping off a bridge here. But yes, I did get married officially. And so I will be a different last name in a couple of months after I go through that lengthy process.
Well, congratulations. And
Thank you.
yeah, I think it's wonderful when people do things differently and that fits what their values and passions are. So yeah.
Yeah, and I can't afford to feed everybody, so I can't do that stuff.
All right. Well, I'm willing for class to close down a little early tonight, unless you all think you need to meet to talk about anything between the two groups. But I think it sounds like you're in pretty good shape. So, all right. Well, let's close it down then. If you have any questions, I know that we're going into a holiday. If you need additional time to get that in on before Sunday, by Sunday, then just let me know. And then I will give you feedback sometime over the next week. Yeah, so I'll make time for that and look for that feedback hopefully by no later than December 1st so that you can make any changes that you need to. But keep working. Like if you got flowcharts and other things that are not in there that you know that you need to be working on, don't wait for my feedback. If you don't have the flowcharts in there, just keep working to put the things together that need to be put together. So, okay. All right, everybody, have a good holiday this next week and hang in there on the shoestring, as somebody said. Hope it's a strong shoestring. So, all right, take care.